So every year, the number of remote roles is significantly reducing, but the applicant pools are tripling because everyone wants those remote roles, but then everyone also wants the Facebook, Google salaries. So that to me is the biggest sort of transition where I've seen a lot of people succeed by saying, you know what, that was good while it lasted. I do know I can earn that at Google, but this small little party planning store that I work at is probably not going to pay me $300,000 to do that. And by offering me 95, let me at least build up my resume, my experience, so I can translate that into other adjacencies versus let me apply for 700 different roles in the FANG companies and get rejected from every single one.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Coaching for Millennials. Today we have a guest on the show who I'm excited to bring on. I've been friends with this person for a really long time and I've never had them on the show. And we were just talking before we started to hit record about how I'm going to introduce him, and I just made some edits. So Dan from HR is here today. He's a TikToker who has over 20,000 followers. He's got extreme experience when it comes to understanding human resources, but also debunking the many myths behind what does HR do, the talent management and recruiting process, also understanding business in general and being able to navigate that. So Dan, I'm so excited to have you on the show finally, but also for you to share some of your expertise as it relates to the content you're producing on TikTok. We're going to talk about some hot topics in the world of work today, and also for you to share a little bit about yourself. So why don't we kick off with you telling the listeners and the people who watch, because this is also a YouTube channel, who Dan from HR is.
My God, what an introduction. Let's ASMR this with this mic. Hi, thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure. I know we tried to do this once in like 2020 and then it didn't work out. So I'm glad that we finally got to connect. As you said, my name is Daniel Space, also known as Dan from HR. Several years ago, I took all of my HR experience working as a business partner for companies like Spotify, Electronic Arts, and made content to explain to people, hey, this is actually how it works. Everything from the creation of job families to how companies think about promotion, development, recruitment, as well as termination, just so that people feel far more informed as they try to navigate the corporate America experience.
Wow. That is a lot in like 39 seconds. But I like that you paraphrase that in a really good strategic little ball.
I've never had to do it before. That's why.
Well, so this is a podcast and it's not an interview, but it is an interview, but it's not like that serious or deep, but it's also intentional. I think that we both have really unique backgrounds where we've both worked in human resources. I particularly have a strong background in higher education, particularly in the area of college recruiting and helping college students find their first or second or third job, but also helping them connect with those recruiters who oftentimes, you connected with in human resources. So thinking about what that looks like, not particularly, I know that we'll talk more about the class of 2024 here in a few minutes, but thinking it from that perspective, you are on TikTok, you have a strong corporate America background, but what has changed that led you onto this path of transitioning from being in the HR business partner role, HRBP role, to then now becoming a solopreneur consultant and TikTok star?
Star, oh my.
It just rolled really well when I thought of it, when I was TikTok star.
TikTok star. I think anyone who works in a corporation, and especially if you're part of the non-cishet white male denomination, there's a sense of having to repress who you are. So as a gay man, especially, like I've always had to sort of change pronouns in my early career, and then like had to sort of, I remember the first Christmas party I ever went to, that was a holiday party. I was using they, thems for my partner, and this was like 2006. So that has always stuck with me, the idea that there's always a part of me I can't really show because it wouldn't be quote unquote professional. So when I realized that the information I had could help a global audience, because this corporate experience is like shared by I think 30% of the world at some point will work in a corporation, my thought was I could have so much more value talking about this and explaining how this works to help other people succeed instead of me narrowingly doing this at exactly one company.
I love that. So you're essentially taking what you have knowledge and experience and years of training doing and basically became what your career was, now transforming it so the larger audiences who may not associate closely to what HR does, but also like are on social media, right? Because they're connected on social media to really understand and engage without having to spend time with HR. Because let's be
Right.
honest, sometimes HR is not the most funnest crew. We get a bad rap. HR
Yeah, for people
practitioners.
that by people who have no idea what we do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were talking about this. We for the people who are watching and listening to this, we literally spent an hour talking before we hit the record button because we had so much to catch up on. And one of the things you said, which kind of struck a chord a little bit for me because I feel that it's a double-edged sword, is that a lot of people really strongly believe that HR is not there for the employees of the company, but they're there for the company. And they don't like HR because HR will never protect you.
Mm.
Such a loaded, very taboo kind of like topic, but also statement, right? We've heard this time and time again. You know, I worked in HR for 4.5 years as a talent acquisition manager, but my job isn't it interesting as HR personnel or HR employees, our jobs aren't what our job titles are. And what I mean by that was like I did reorganization and restructuring. I did change management. I did forced departures. I work with compensation closely to create job families. I created brand new departments. Like
Oh my
I was
God.
there
All of
to
this with the title of a recruiting
hire
manager.
people and find talent and look at people's resumes and screen them and then create a short list. Like that was like a small piece of my job. Needless to say, I felt very pigeonholed and understood why my job and my function was so disliked by the people at the organization that I worked at. Which is why I feel like that statement that I said, I struggle with because I found myself in positions where I didn't feel like I was being supported, even though I worked in human resources by my HR BP or the HR personnel.
Right.
You still living and breathing this every single day and using your experience to share this knowledge and wisdom with people. How would
Mm.
you see both sides of that statement for what it is? And how would you, let's not necessarily say demystify the myth or debunk the myth, but how would you encourage people to understand the operation of when people are saying that and they feel that way and what's leading people to get to that point?
Sure. So I think there's the basic foundation is to understand what HR's purpose is. And I find it a little bit ironic that you and I, both in our experience in HR, could probably do a really good job of describing what someone in marketing would do, someone in sales would do, someone in engineering, someone in product, because we design job families. We design job family matrices, we do the org design. So we become very competent in describing what these roles do. But we both know it would be really rude to tell a marketer, well, your job is to do this, not this. But the unmitigated gall that people have, especially in comment section on TikTok, to tell me what my role is, I just feel like it's just such an educational moment because HR has not been able to drive that narrative. And instead, it's driven by unions and it's driven by employment attorneys, both who I think have very good intentions, but also have their own motivations. And dunking on HR is one of their ways of getting what it is that they want. So what my education is always based on is what is first you have to be able to define HR's purpose. And if you can't do that, then it's better to sit back and listen and absorb what people talk about instead of running with your preconceived notion. So I always say think about HR the same way you think about finance. If it has to do with money, that goes to finance. If it has to do with employees, it goes to HR. That's one of the easiest ways to think about it. And so our role, just like any other role, can be invested in, it could be strengthened, it could be squashed down by bad executives the same way every other department can be. But our job is to do anything to do with people. So I think people, especially if they work in front end retail, especially if they work in food services, these are places that don't usually invest in a strong HR department. And I think they have an experience in which they bring up a complaint, especially to a manager, that might be inappropriate. And HR sort of protects that manager. When we say protect, it means they potentially file a complaint, but then nothing happens to it. But unless you're in those meetings and unless you're in those sort of backdoor discussions, you don't understand that in many cases, HR is fighting for you, because our normal thought process is what causes the most good for the most employees. But we are consistently outvoted by people in senior management or in legal. So that I do think that the whole idea that HR is not your side or HR works for the side of the company is not wrong, but everyone is working for the company. That's why we have this relationship. But that's not to suggest that HR will not do the right thing, but may still potentially be outvoted.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point, because oftentimes I've found that many people's perception is that their unique experience from HR is the only experience they've had. And it's also based on just an encounter from working with an HR business partner or working from an HR representative that has 5,000 jobs and is there to support the structure of the organization while also be able to support the individual who's coming to them. Having said that, though, do you feel that a lot of HR practitioners are invested in wanting to support the employees more so than wanting to support the corporation and what the corporation's values and means are? I mean, let's say, for example, you have a couple of employees, let's say a few, more than two, a few employees who have strongly felt a sense of, I don't know, perhaps frustration over how their leadership is interacting and engaging with them, which I think is very common, right? I think we'll talk about the job market here in a second, but it's probably one of the biggest reasons why so many people in today's world of work and workforce are looking for jobs. Over 50% of people in working today, a Forbes article published this in May, are unhappy with their work and looking for new jobs. So
I'm surprised it's that low.
I think that it was a very conservative number, but I also feel that it's a very specific statistic.
Right.
I think that people probably chose not to answer honestly when it comes to that. Like, we know how those pulse surveys always end up with people either are really transparent and honest and very vulnerable, and then there's people who don't want to share because they're scared of what could happen.
Nope. I think
so. In this instance, if you have these few individuals, like, HR has a process, right, that they have to follow by to really determine how to understand what is happening. And if these employees don't see a change after going to HR numerous times, how disengaged might an employee feel, or disconnected might an employee feel when they thought they were doing the right thing, but they're not feeling supported by HR?
So I think this is such a great example of this large information disconnect. So as you were talking, I was like just immediately going back to old teams where I worked with, where I can now imagine this. So let's say usually an HRBP is assigned to a function. So at Electronic Arts, I was with marketing and data. They had almost 380 people internationally. If two people said that they didn't feel that leadership was engaging them in the right way, I think we're doing a phenomenal job, because that means 99% of people feel well engaged and feel like the mission is being brought into. You're always going to have people that don't feel that, you know what, this works for 99% of people, but it doesn't focus for the 1%. Provided that that 1% is not illegal, provided that it's not detrimental, provided that it's not causing mental harm, provided that it's not putting their own space at risk versus just, you know what, I don't really like that. I think that acknowledgement of I don't like that can help you articulate them. What is it that you do like? Like, where's a culture where you think you would thrive? But the idea that two people who may not be happy with an environment, and we can even bring it up to 5 to 6. So if you have 5 to 6 people saying, I'm not happy with my team lead, that is not my job to solve. And I think that's where a lot of this disappointment comes in, because people are like, well, I went to my HR person and nothing happened. But you have to be able to break that down into so many pieces. And ultimately, it's the manager's job to solve. I can help consult, I can help guide, I can help act as the voice for the team if they feel like they're, afraid of, what do they call it? A big R word,
Mm-hmm.
retaliation. Phew, I'm getting old. So if they're too afraid to speak to that, I can act as their voice, but my job is not going to be manager. You now have to change your ways from this vague, ambiguous thing of being toxic into making sure that these 6 employees feel like you're less toxic, especially if you have 47 other employees who have never complained.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And I think we could probably go deeper into that, but we're going to save that for a whole different conversation because I think just that one
Yes.
topic itself serves as a whole conversation. Let's shift gears a little bit here to the job market. I know we just briefly talked about this in this conversation, but also we were talking about it offline. So, a couple of things have happened in the job market more recently. We're seeing that the number of unemployment is gone down significantly. We get those reports every quarter to see how the job market's doing. What I'm finding, and you tell me based on the data you have, because you probably have access to way more data than I do, is that there is an oversaturation of job seekers, but that also correlates to the fact that the number of unemployment applicants slash users is down. Why do we think that the trend of seeing so many job applicants is happening currently? And what are your thoughts on, what the future of the job market is for the rest of 2024? Because we know the economy plays a huge factor in how the job market, goes back and forth, whether it's high or low, and why unemployment goes higher or lower during certain times of the year. But what are your thoughts on all that?
So I think 2021 to 2022 was a blessing and a curse in many ways. I was very, very happy to see so many people really winning corporate America for the first time, because to me, the house always is going to win. But for the first time in their lives, people were able to actually have a modicum of control. They were able to say, "Wait a minute, I'm being pursued by 3 different companies. 2 of them are FANG companies. I'm being offered salaries that I've never even dreamed of. I'm being, the ability to work from my home in Wyoming and get like a San Francisco salary working for Facebook. Never before had people had this." And then I think people, one, got very used to it. And two, all of these coaches came up, all these business people came up. I know there's several self-made compensation negotiation experts who take like a portion of like your salary offer because they're going to expertly negotiate you, but companies are expecting you to negotiate anyway. So you're giving away a free percentage of that delta. And then so everyone just got really empowered saying, oh my God, I was only doing like project management for this small insurance firm in Wyoming and making 125, but Facebook paid me 280,000 between stock bonus. That should be where I'm earning. And then all the remote jobs went away. All these companies did massive layoffs. The remote job population, I think, was like 88% on LinkedIn for 2021. It was like 63 for 2022. It was like 33 for 2023. And it's like 11 for this year. So every year, the number of remote roles is significantly reducing, but the applicant pools are tripling because everyone wants those remote roles. But then everyone also wants the Facebook, Google salaries. So that to me is the biggest sort of transition where I've seen a lot of people succeed by saying, you know what, that was good while it lasted. I do know I can earn that at Google, but this small little party planning store that I work at is probably not going to pay me $300,000 to do that. And by offering me 95, let me at least build up my resume, my experience, so I can translate that into other adjacencies versus let me apply for 700 different roles in the FANG companies and get rejected from every single one.
Yeah. So what do you think is the next step with what could be potentially happening currently right now in the job economy? Because obviously you mentioned 33% drop, or well, not 33% drop, but it's at 33% in 2023. What do you think it's at for 2024?
About 11. It's almost less than 10% of all open roles are remote.
So 11% of the jobs that are posted out there on job search platforms, LinkedIn, Indeed, Recruiter, whatever it's called, all those
Mhm.
are very minimal number of work from home remote positions.
Yeah, of those remote
And
roles.
so
Yep.
that's the shift that you think is currently taking place in the moment with the high number of job seekers.
So that, and it's also leading into several conversations. This can be a whole other topic, but the idea of access. So there was someone who wrote a blog post that went a little bit controversial because some people felt this was entitled and other people felt this was a fair case, where the person said, I have a disability where I cannot leave my house. I need to work remote. My application should be given priority over like the 100 of others. And there were people that were like, that's actually, I feel like that's unfair because I have nothing to do with your disability, but I would like to work remote because I have kids. And the third person saying, I'm not disabled, I don't have kids, but why does that mean I have to compromise and not get my application viewed? So I think it serves a much larger conversation in several ways that we're not going to get into here. But that, I think, ongoing conversation, especially as relates to access and disability, is going to be a continued focus on for job search.
And particularly in the remote sector.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that we could also tailor that to a variety of different industries that the workforce is zoned in on. I mean, we saw just last year in 2023 all these big tech companies that had massive layoffs that created, a problematic exodus in, where all these people are going to go and work. And I think
Right.
at this point, many of those individuals are found at this point a job, but I feel like the job search process is now longer in finding opportunity. Before it used to be somewhere between 3 months. It was the average time from applying to hire, and or if you were laid off, potentially maybe even finding a job within 3 months of getting laid off. I think that's changed now to 6 months, 8 months in a way because of.
Um,
What are your thoughts?
I think it has, but it's also there's two different cross sections that I think impact that. One is your niche. So I'm very very fortunate. If I wanted to go back to work, I could probably easily find a job within 2 to 3 months. The HRBP role is really really high demand, low supply. I have name brand companies. I have a lot of experience. I know how to do the job. I know how to do it well. Anytime I put open to work on my LinkedIn without even the banner, but just registered recruiters, I can usually count on anywhere between 5 to 10 LinkedIn hits. That I'm super privileged. I was in the right spot at the right time to have that. If I was a program manager, that is a much much bigger pool of people that have those skill sets. So you could have 1,000 very 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 experienced program managers who could all do the job, but if you're applying to remote roles at high paying companies, everyone else is also doing the same thing, because now the applicant pool is no longer just anyone who lives in the city, it's everyone in the
Yeah,
nation who sees this role and wants to work there. So I think part of it has to be your industry, and second is the what are your absolute no nos. So after the layoff at Epic, I think 30 people had found a role within a month because they were okay to work live and in an office in Durham and in Raleigh. They were like, hey, here, I have this unique skill set, whether it's in IT or art or this. Here's this open role. The company's hiring. They're like, we need someone who's at least comfortable working 3 days a week. Great, fine. But for the people that, again, are like a technical program manager who wants to work for a video game company and wants to be remote, if those are going to be your no-nos, you have to come in with a very open mind that you're going to be doing a lot of competing.
yeah. So I think the message there is just be aware of what you're going up against, knowing that your niche and industry is probably somewhat saturated with the same type of folks who are looking for the similar roles. Would you say
Yeah.
that for people who are potentially considering a career change or a career pivot because they're at that point, do you have any advice from an HR perspective that could help them stand out a little bit more when they're in that career pivot opportunity or career period time of their life, that they've spent, 10 years as a programmer, developer, and they did that since they were in college, and now they're entering a different phase of their career in life, that might lead them to a different direction. What would you say would be some advice to share?
So I encourage it. I love the idea of career pivots, but you have to. Okay, I have to say this in a way that does not insult anyone, um, especially recruiters who I love and adore, but they tend to be very myopic. And so if I put myself in the mind of a recruiter and I'm looking for programmers, and you are a programmer turned technical architect. So now you want to work on network infrastructure from an architect standpoint. You have to draw that very, very obviously for the recruiter, because the recruiter is probably just phased in on job titles. So if you have like 10 years of programming in Java, but now you want to focus on network architecture, you have to make that very clear, like in bold letters, like here's how I can take this experience and do that for this role. Because if you have recruiters looking for programmers and viewing 100 resumes, they're moving anyone that has programmer for similar types of companies into the yes file. Anyone that's not is just going to immediately know.
Yeah. So you have to really make sure you're standing out, not just using your keywords and your summary, but also how do you stand out from showcasing what is transferable to that new role, and making sure you're following the job description to be able to.
There's one of my. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
So I helped a friend. This is one of my favorite stories to sort of highlight this point, where she was a store manager for a supermarket and became like a district manager, seeing over three. But she wanted to be a recruiter for whatever reason. Like that, she had major FOMO. Anytime she spoke to recruiters, she wanted to be a recruiter. We got to a point where on her resume, on the very top line, it said, "I'm a store manager turned district manager who wants to take what I've learned as it relates to staffing and become a full-time recruiter role." The difference between having that sentence and not having that sentence on her resume was everything. Like immediately she started to at least get applications opened and people saying, "Hey, this is great. We don't have anything right now." Or "Hey, you may want to meet this person." Or people just saying, "Oh, perfect. Okay, so but before it had that, because all people saw was district manager, store manager, people were like, "Why are you applying to a recruiter role?" So sometimes you have to be that on the nose.
Yeah. So share what your experience is. Don't let your experience prevent you from shining and standing out, because it brings a different perspective.
Correct.
So I know that we're running close to time, and I want to respect that. Do you have? I know we had like three more hot topics we want to get through, so we can save those for another conversation because we're not
Yes.
going anywhere. But tell the kids, tell the people, tell the folks listening and watching, where can they find you? How can they connect with you? And what's something that you're working on that you would want people to know and you want to share?
Sure. So I am found on all social media as Dan from HR, also Daniel Space on LinkedIn. I'm currently working on a membership subscription site for other HR business partners, just sort of building a community for us. But I will always have at least one foot dipped in job search. And I just finished publishing my LinkedIn guide, which is available on all of my socials, that sort of teaches you how LinkedIn works from the inside.
Oh, awesome. Well, we'll be sure to link that, excuse me, in the show notes for people to follow and how to connect with you. So, Dan,
Yes.
this was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for your time with us today. I hope
Thank you.
that people who are on TikTok don't come back to read you as they do, but that your advice is very necessary and needed, because there's a lot of haters. But go follow Dan from HR on TikTok, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.